Go
So
ahead with
Enoch 7, 1 through 2 goes on to say, and all the others together with them took unto themselves wives. So these are the rebellious angels. And they began to go in unto them and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant and they bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells or 300 cubits.
Yeah, we got a super tall guy over here in the left side, right? There's almost no consensus among scholars on what the exact length of a biblical cubit was. And we'll talk more about that, about the cubit later. But when it comes to 300 cubits here, estimates range from 438 to 515 feet tall.
It's big.
That's about
It's
a
big.
40-story building, meeting the modern
Right.
criteria for a skyscraper. It sounds
Right.
almost too big to be believable, honestly, but that doesn't mean it isn't true because we are talking about the first generation giants here. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility considering that they were fathered by angels who are some of the most mighty and powerful beings in existence ever. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was actually was going to reference back to this picture you put here. So this graphic that you chose here with these, it has what looks like white angel wings on black bodies that are made of like dirt and dust.
Huh.
So the giants that were produced as the Nephilim from the rebellious angels taking wives, that is depicted here, they're not called normal men.
No.
They're called unclean spirits.
Mm-hmm.
So if they actually had a form of a spirit body, then they can change sizes.
True. Like Ant-Man.
kind of like Ant-Man, yeah, yeah. So like I mean, to me, it's always baffled me. Like people be like, "Oh, this is just ludicrous. How could anything be this tall?" Well, I'm like, well, the writer of Enoch didn't say it's ludicrous because he goes on to say, I don't know if you got it in the next slide here, but you don't. But it goes on to say that they were too big and they consumed the acquisitions of men and they were causing a problem. There was mass bloodshed and lawlessness on the earth.
We got that coming
So
up.
yeah, so and mix that with understanding what an actual spirit being is and how Scripture describes that they can change their shapes and sizes. This would make perfect sense. Why not only are they still here after the flood with as unclean spirits, but they could have made themselves very tall if they wanted to.
Agreed.
So,
But if
yeah.
you go to the next one, just for a comparison here on what 300 cubits may possibly very well be, like I said, in the range of 500 feet. And so that puts them right there, a little bit taller than the Pyramid of Giza, which
Right.
would now make sense how they could have been built.
Right.
Possibly. Right under the
Well, I mean,
Washington Monument. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you included it in your slides, but there are Egyptian hieroglyphs of giants messing with obelisks,
Right.
picking them up and transporting them. Yeah.
Yep. There's no doubt in my mind that they were used to build and that they themselves built structures. Man,
Yep.
I know there's some contention and debate about this measurement given, whereas the manuscripts from the Ge'ez, right, the Ethiopian version of Enoch, and the Dead Sea Scrolls have a much bigger number that some have tried to say means closer to 4,000 feet tall. But I
Yeah.
tend to lean more towards the 300 cubit translations, putting them in the 500 feet range.
Yeah.
What say you?
It's hard to tell, man. Unfortunately, I'm not an ancient linguist, or
Right.
I can't show definitively what put the text on screen with the
Yeah.
breaking down of that particular ancient word. But even like I said, they were called titans, for a reason, that they were supposedly so big that food was becoming a problem.
Yeah.
So
Big enough. That's
yeah,
big enough to be called giants, that's for sure.
that's right.
Yep. And if you go to the next one, we have a colorized diagram from a geology textbook, a geology and science textbook in 1665 called
Wow.
Mundus Subterraneus by Athanasius Kircher. And he claimed that an enormous skeleton had been discovered in a Sicilian cave in the 14th century. Here he shows that giant scale in comparison to a normal human, the biblical giant Goliath, a Swiss giant, and a Mauritanian giant.
Wow.
With the one here on the far left being massive. I'd say that would be in the range of 500 feet based on the scale of the Homo ordinaris, ordinary human.
That's funny. Yeah, I think clothes would be a problem, right? Trying to find the right clothes for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he got the leaves. So yeah,
They
textbooks in
didn't
the
have
1600s apparently, right?
a big and tall store back then. So
I was just thinking of that earlier. That's funny. That's right.
it's pretty wild.
And then we got that another mention in that passage we read from Enoch a minute ago And the gibberellins is any group of plant hormones that occur in seeds, young leaves, and roots, from the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is important because we saw there, right as it was talking about the height of those giants, it said that the angels who sinned and procreated with the women took wives. They taught them cutting of roots. And so then we go to this word gibberellins, which we'll see is why it's unique and interesting comparison. During the 1930s, Japanese scientists isolated a growth promoting substance from cultures of a fungus that parasitizes rice plants. They called it gibberellin. Gibberellins are a group of about 125 closely related plant hormones synthesized in the root, stem, young leaves, and seed embryos. These chemicals regulate a wide range of processes such as flowering, growth by stem elongation, and seed germination and fruit ripening. And so I thought it was interesting that stem elongation is mentioned, given that one of the tribes of giants in scripture is called the Anakim, which can be translated as long neck ones. So if the plant hormones have to do with stem elongation, it's interesting that Anakim are called long neck ones. What's immediately recognizable to me is the prefix of this word they chose for these hormones, because it sounds a lot like that Hebrew word gibberim.
Gibberim,
which is the word translated as mighty men in Genesis 6:4. Would you read?
Yep. And it makes me wonder if this is the same concept of the word mighty being used in Revelation 19 as well.
Mm-hmm. Very well.
when Messiah comes back. So yeah, from the Gibberim of Strong's 1368, it's the definitions of champion, a great man, great men, mighty men, mighty ones, mighty warriors, strong man or valiant. And this is from Genesis 6:4. This is where that word pulls from. You also see it in other places as well. 2 Samuel 23, a couple different places. Some of the bodyguards mentioned of David and different things like that. But ultimately, this is the first use of it, and in its context, it's being described of these giants.
There you go.
Because obviously, as if you're bigger, you got more strength, so you're going to be mightier. Did you notice though? This just stuck out to me for the first time. Look at this description from the gibberellin. It's cultured from a fungus that becomes a parasite on rice plants. Yeah. That's like really popular right now in pop culture with the new zombie craze called The Last of Us.
Oh yeah,
where the people are become zombies because a fungus becomes a parasite within, it grows as a parasite within them and takes over their brain, turns them into a zombie,
turns them into a cannibal.
So turns them into a cannibalistic zombie. Yeah, so that's interesting.
It is, isn't it? How about that? And these gibberellins are just one of 5 major growth hormones in the chemical makeup of plants and trees. And ultimately, this cutting of roots that Semyaza and the rebellious angels taught their wives and the people in the days of Jared would have been deeply connected with the enchantments and charms, or the sorcery and incantations, as the Richard Lawrence translation says, as in these roots would be an ingredient in their witchcraft that would result in the massive size of these giants, not just the fact that they were part spirit, right? So, but for more information and a deeper study on this, I have to again recommend the Investigating Babylon series on Kingdom and Context in part 3 called Science of Giants. Sean does a great job breaking down the consistent use of sorcery by the nations who were anti-Yahweh in his covenant, and more about the plant hormones too, so be sure to check that out.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, no worries.